here it is.
Got it?
Yeah. Is this just called The Professional or Leon the Professional?
Depends on if you saw it in France or if you saw it in the United States.
Oh, great. One of those
It's
asshole movies.
No,
where
it's just,
They're like, we're going to change the name for this country. Really?
Yeah. I think I don't know why. I don't know why that is. Is there I wonder if there's like an American thing where if you say, oh, this is Leon the Professional, they're like, are we supposed to know who Leon is? You know,
I'm not caught up. I won't watch this.
It's like the Road Warrior was like Mad Max 2, but in America they called it the Road Warrior because like nobody knew who Mad Max was.
Right, so you kind of just want people to jump on.
They're just sort of like I don't know. I bet there is something to that. Like if we put a name in the title and people don't know who it is, they'll think it's part of a series. They'll stay away. You know what I mean? Like
it could be.
It could be something like that.
I don't know. Just like there are some weird like translation name changes, like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. It's just I don't know why they do it most of the time. It seems kind of weird.
Does sorcerer mean something else in England?
No.
Is there like a darker sort of slang to it?
I think the thing was like they started with the Philosopher's Stone, and then when they were printing in America, they didn't think Americans knew the word philosopher. So they just changed it to sorcerer.
Or they had a different... That's what it is then. There's a different baggage that comes with it.
It's a different connotation.
Yeah, for philosopher, not sorcerer. That's weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Americans are the ones who had the whole satanic panic out of it. And it would have been better off to call it the Philosopher's Stone instead of...
Sorcery?
Right.
Magic? The devil?
It's really weird. Hello and welcome to the Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rude. I'm Phil Rude. I'm the dad.
I'm Austin Rude, and I am the son. Every week we watch a movie, and then we get on mic, and we talk about it.
That's right.
I mean, every week, not for a while.
That we're recording.
For now, yeah.
I mean, you know.
On some weeks, we get on mic.
During the production schedule, we'll call it. We are... coming back.
That's
we're back.
Right.
Not
back
coming
in
back.
business.
We're back.
Our doors are open.
That's right.
But don't come in. We're recording.
This is our home. Please.
It's ridiculous.
This is a private residence.
Quit stalking us, please.
Seriously, man.
I know our show is the greatest thing ever, and you want bonus content, but watching us eat dinner through a window is
it's really off-putting.
Especially, you have to pay for the Patreon to get that footage, okay?
That's right. If we start a Patreon and we put a seriously high level on there, like $1,000 a month, and you get to come have dinner at our house, would you go in for that? Would you be like, yeah, if you'll give us $1,000, yeah, you can come have dinner with us?
Sure.
Okay.
You can cook too, whatever.
We're looking for we're exploring our options here for the Patreon.
That's right. We don't have enough friends, so we're just Patreon's our way to make friends.
Except you have to pay to be our friend. Yeah.
That's how it works. That's how normal friends work, right?
Yeah. Sure.
I've been going about this the wrong way. Oh my god.
Yeah. You know, you may want to explore reversing the revenue stream. You'll probably get more friends.
Okay.
But we have been on a little more extended hiatus than we had originally planned. We had some life happens kind of stuff.
As always.
But we're back. How was your break?
It was good.
How was your season 3 to 4 summer break? Your holiday break?
It was nice.
Yeah?
Yeah. Went to Canada. Now I'm back at work. Yeah. And that's boring. But, I got stuff done.
Seeing the bright lights of Canada, it's hard to go back to your mundane regular life.
It's very true. They're living it up high and mighty in Canada.
High on maple syrup and Molson.
Boy. That stuff is everywhere.
Canadian whiskey. Did you watch anything? Or I mean, I watched a ton of stuff, but like, do you have anything that you want to highlight?
I've watched a lot, but this was after the podcast ended. Last Night in Soho came out. And I don't think I've talked about that yet.
We talked about that.
Did we?
You went and saw it at some point when we were still recording. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Yeah, there was that, and then while I was in Canada, I saw Guillermo del Toro's most recent film, Midnight Alley.
Nightmare
Alley. Yeah.
Maybe it's Midnight Alley in Canada.
They changed the name. Oh my god. Just to mess with me. And it was interesting. It was about it's like a neo-noir film about circus and entrepreneurship, and it gets really dark, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. I listened to the Guillermo del Toro episode of WTF with Mark Maron.
Yeah.
And he talked a lot about noir and how he's been trying to make this movie for like 20-something years.
Guillermo?
Yeah. And just kind of, they didn't spoil it, but described it in a way of like, oh, that's not what I thought this movie was. And it sounds crazy interesting to me. And I really, really want to see it.
It is, looking at it, it's a hard movie to describe.
Right. I like that, though, because then you have to experience it. You know, there's no like easy way in or no way to, you go in with no expectations, I think.
Yeah, I think you should, because if you go in like, oh, this is going to be like this, it's not. Right. So you're just going to end up all twisted around and like, well, that didn't end how I wanted it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to go in, I think. Or a good way to subverted expectations, you know, of
There's
something else.
Really cool, like, just character work there. Like, Willem Dafoe is this weird, kind of twisted character.
Oh, Willem Dafoe plays a weird, twisted character, huh?
I know. It's so out of his
really
comfort.
strange. It's good to see him putting himself out there like that.
And I don't know who... There's a female... I think she'd probably be credited as another lead actress in that. And she is so well... Just... Such a good performance. She's like a villain in it. I'm trying to find
who we got here. Now. We got Cate Blanchett. Toni Collette is in it. Oh wow, there's Rooney Mara, Mary Steenburgen. My God, everybody's in this movie.
I think it was Toni Collette.
Yeah, I love Toni Collette. She's great. She's in The Sixth Sense. She's the mom in The Sixth Sense. She's a mom in Hereditary.
Oh, yeah.
She's a mom in a really good Sam Rockwell movie called The Way, Way Back. Have you seen that?
No, but I've heard of it.
You should see that. That's a really, really good really good movie. It's really interesting and like a fun comedy drama. Okay. Maybe not fun, but a really sort of like nice coming of age kind of story.
This is not a mom role.
She's not playing mom this time?
She plays a twisted psychiatrist, kind of therapist kind of deal. Super cool, though. It's a really good movie. I don't think it beats out Shape of Water.
Interesting.
And in my personal ranking, but it is a nice movie.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
What did you fill your break with?
So many things, but I'll just shout out right now. A week ago, as we're recording this, I sat down with TV's Travis, and we talked about Quentin Tarantino's Jackie Brown. So find the Wait You Haven't Seen podcast, and by the time this drops, it'll be 2 or 3 episodes back in the archives, and check that out and watch Jackie Brown if you haven't. It's great. We had a really good time with it. Really good conversation.
That's one of those like lesser known Tarantino.
We talk about that. It's sort of like not talked about as much. So we were really happy. I'm happy to have introduced Travis to that movie, and he and I had a great conversation about it. But the movie I really want to highlight is it's called Street Gang. It's on HBO Max, and it is about the early years of Sesame Street, the children's educational TV show, and sort of talks about the mission of Sesame Street was to help kids who were not being served, like low-income children who were not being served by the educational system in the same way, and help them go to school with the same, sort of close that gap a little bit. The diversity that they brought into that, because it was originally aimed at a lot of Black and Latino, like New York City kids. But then also in the South, where like a lot of underfunded education systems were leaving a lot of white kids behind too, and the struggles they had with that in the segregated South in the 60s. And
it's a very interesting time of change.
It really is. And to see where this thing that is like a total institution on TV, where that fits into this, and how it sort of grew out of this culture gap and income gap and all of this sort of separation, how this was born out of that, and kind of against odds became very successful, and talked about bringing in Jim Henson and the Muppets and all of this other stuff. It's got some great outtakes with swearing Muppets. It really is just a super interesting look at Sesame Street. And if you grew up with the show like I did, and I wasn't there at the inception of Sesame. I think late 60s it began.
Oh, so you're a fake fan.
So 10 years later, that's right. 10 years later, I was watching it, and a lot of that same original cast. So it has a lot of footage and a lot of interview footage with original cast members that I remember growing up with. So yeah, if you are a fake fan like me, but you grew up in that same era, I think you'll get a lot of nostalgia hits out of it. But also it's just a really interesting documentary about the education gaps in America, really, in pre-elementary education, you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's something about there's Sesame Street, there's Mr. Rogers,
yep.
And even I would say Bob Ross, even though he's not kind of meant to be, all of these wholesome kind of kid shows or life lesson shows.
Right.
There's something about those that I just love learning about.
Well, they were all based in being super positive and teaching you either Sesame Street was education focused. Mr. Rogers was very based on being in touch with your feelings and validating whatever you're feeling. It's okay to feel things.
Yeah, it's heavy social emotional learning.
A lot of emotional learning is, I think, a great way to put it. And Bob Ross is about showing you that this thing you think you can't do it with me and I'll show you how to do it. And really encourage, there's a Bob Ross documentary I think I talked about on here on Netflix, and it's really interesting because it is just very much, there's a lot of weird, Bob Ross had an affair and all of these other things, but really it's all the gist of it is that positive thing about how many people started painting because Bob Ross showed them look, we can do this.
Right.
Do this with me. Yeah.
These programs are important.
Yeah, and was sort of the mission statement of public television, and it's why when they're fighting for funding from the government all the time, it's important to kind of back that fight, you know what I mean, and say, yeah, public TV is important. It's important culturally to, to all of us,
to everyone,
really,
yeah,
So, yeah.
Support PBS.
Yes, and that is also a reminder. We are doing our pledge drive, and and if you donate to the picture show with Austin and Phil Rude, we will present you with this beautiful tote bag.
That's right. The picture show is here because of listeners
like you.
Please don't sue us, PBS. Please.
The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Well, I guess that's more the Melinda Gates Foundation now. Anyway.
Oh, boy.
Yes, before we get sued by everybody. Let's talk about what we watched this week.
What did we watch?
We watched the 1994 action drama The Professional, or Leon the Professional, depending on where you saw it. This movie is about a 12-year-old girl who is taken in by a hitman after her family is murdered. This film stars Natalie Portman as Matilda, Jean Reno as Leon, Danny Aiello as Tony, and our favorite, Gary Oldman, fixture of the show.
That's right.
As Stansfield. This movie was written and directed by Luc Besson. And on that note, I do just want to say, I am aware, and we're not trying to ignore it or deny it, Luc Besson has faced some very serious allegations in recent years.
Oh boy, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Luc Besson has been, he has had some accusations leveled against him. There is probably some relevance to that in discussing this movie, but I really don't want to dwell on it very much because there are some Luc Besson movies I like very much, and I try very hard to separate what I love about these movies from the kind of questionable. I believe he's been cleared of most of his charges, but still, when 9 women bring allegations against you, it's hard to not think there's something going on there, even if we're not finding out the entire story.
Unlikely, yeah.
So, if you don't want to listen to this, I don't blame you. I also don't want you to think we're ignoring this stuff because we're denying this stuff. It's just, I think, I want to talk about this movie as opposed to the scandalous nature of Luc Besson in recent years.
Yes, and there is some questionable stuff in this movie, too,
I think there is, and I think there's...
I think we can have a discussion about that.
I do think there is an overlap in that. I come out in an interesting place in looking at the relationship of this movie, but there is definitely some baggage to it, and some baggage that came out after the fact. Natalie Portman was very young at this time.
I think she was 11 when this was filmed.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
First things first. It's very interesting, their take on Matilda. I didn't expect a dark and gritty reboot of the Danny DeVito film. Matilda with the magic powers.
What's that Roald Dahl book?
That is, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I just had to make that joke. No, this is
I don't remember this.
Where's her teacher in this? Well, I guess that would be Leon.
This would have actually come out around the same time.
Probably.
Mid-90s?
Yeah.
Matilda's a
early
90s
2000s
kids movie, too. Yeah, very, very... I would love to see, someone who mistakenly took their kid to this movie instead of...
The angry letters that they'd write.
Okay, first things first.
Yes.
This was your first time seeing this movie, right?
It was.
And what did you think?
It's definitely a movie. That's my take.
Okay.
I think it's a fun kind of ride to take. It's an interesting character study. I kind of think that's the focus, is these characters. And so that's kind of what I wrote down in my notes, is at the heart of it, this is an action, this is a drama, but it's really about these characters.
I agree. Yeah. Because I think a couple times I saw this movie, I was like, this is a great action movie. And the more I watch it, the more I am like, this is definitely a character study. That's where the heart of this whole movie is.
Really, the action doesn't even stick out as
it's kind of
noteworthy.
It's kind of generic.
It's getting the plot done so we can get more to other stuff.
Yeah, the opening scene where he's doing the hit on the guys in like the big penthouse.
Sure.
You know, like it's such a, like looking at it now, it's like this is such a generic 90s action scene. You know what I mean? Like it's super cool when he comes out of the shadows behind the guy, you know, and stuff like that, but it just is like, oh, here's generic 90s coke dealers and all the bullet holes through the shutters and things like that. Like it looks like every other action scene from this time. But I think the shootout at the end is actually really well done. Yeah. But outside of all of that, in the middle, there's not that much going on as far as like shootouts. There's the murder of the family, but everything else is pretty much just focusing on these two really dysfunctional characters, you know?
Yeah, and like the training and all that that takes the focus.
And what did you think of the character study? Was it satisfying to you, or was it sort of like everyone kind of sucks in this movie? Because I don't think everyone totally sucks, but I could see how someone could walk away and be like, these are all really unlikable people.
Right. I think there's a little bit of that. I think my main thing is I don't think it did enough with these characters. Like, we get the basics. Like, we get that Leon is, like, a hitman who, like, is illiterate. Like, he never learned to read. He probably joined this life, like, early on, just like Matilda's trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we get, like, the sweetness from him and, like, playing, with like his puppet.
Oven mitt, yeah.
But like, I don't know. There's a really interesting story here. I just want to get into it because there's an inappropriate kind of relationship between Leon and Matilda, but the film shows that it's one-sided. That like Matilda thinks she's in love with Leon,
right?
When really he's just like the only person that's ever been nice to her.
Right.
And she's like a little girl. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She's trying to be vulgar. She's trying to be
tough.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's trying to be an adult to prove herself or something. And we see Leon like deflect these, like, she comes on to him and he like just kind of brushes it to the side, and she like tells the hotel clerk that that's her lover and all this.
It's a really very strange dynamic.
It makes it uncomfortable.
Yes, and it does.
I like that the film, it's very clear to me that this is like anti-pedophiles, but like I just wish that there was a scene where Leon was like, this is unacceptable, or like just told her off for it, kind of spoke that out loud, because so it can't be misconstrued.
Because I think that's what everybody watching wants him to do, because it is like clearly inappropriate. But I think the movie going for a little more of a artistic and a little more understated, without blatantly telling you everything in this movie on the surface is shoved directly at you. Stansfield, Gary Oldman, is the craziest guy, and he's going to show you that he's the craziest guy. All the action is like in your face. So all the emotional stuff and all the character stuff, Luc Besson, he pulls it back, and I think that's the right move also, because in talking about like when Leon came to this life, like they do allude to that. Like Danny Aiello tells him, like, remember when you came to this country and you were in trouble, it was over a woman. You get a sense that like Leon is sort of like, he's not just illiterate. I think he's like emotionally unintelligent. I think he and Matilda are on a very similar like emotional intelligence level. I think he's stunted in some way.
It's kind of like, weird reference here, but 13 going on 30.
I agree that it is a weird reference.
There's a scene in that I just remember of like this 13-year-old in a 30-year-old's body
like Big.
hitting. Yeah, she hits on like a 12-year-old at a birthday party.
I haven't seen the movie, but
I don't know. I saw it in middle school, and like I'm just thinking of that scene, how like they're on the same
emotional level,
but it's very uncomfortable to watch.
There's a Robin Williams movie called Jack. Have you ever seen that?
No.
Where he plays a child who ages quickly. So it's Robin Williams as a full-grown, like 50-year-old man, but the character is like 12. And there's a scene in there where this woman is picking him up, and it's very uncomfortable because in your mind, you're seeing two adults like be sexual with each other. But in your mind, you're going, that's a child. And it's the same thing in Big, where like Tom Hanks is essentially a 13-year-old. And I just saw a TikTok last week where it's like the aftermath of Big. And it's the woman going, yeah, he's 12. Yeah, I'm seeing him later. Like realizing that she had sex with a 12-year-old boy.
Oh my God.
It's just like, it's just very like, yeah, there is some like weird fallout when you break down these age swap movies. But in this one, I do think there's like a, let me just go over my notes of this. The relationship in this movie, it's not parental, it's not romantic, it's not strictly a mentor-protege relationship, and it's not a traditional friendship. And I think where this works is because Leon and Matilda, it's none of these things, and even they don't understand how to define their relationship. But they do have a relationship, and I don't think it's sexual. I think that is like Matilda mistaking it for something like that. At certain points, she mistakes Leon for her father, for her mentor, for her lover, and for her friend. And I don't think it's any of these things, but these people still like very much care for each other.
Because when you're that age, you feel these big, huge emotions, but you don't have the words or the understanding.
And I think I think Leon is the same way because he is in some way stunted. I don't think he's, necessarily like, I'm sure people have somewhere broken this down of like, is he on the spectrum? Is he neurodivergent in any way? And I just think he's emotionally stunted in some way. And that he sort of is a little bit childlike. Yeah. If you watch him. And it's not like he's not mentally handicapped or anything like that. I just think he's somewhere along the way been traumatized or emotionally stunted. So he is a little bit childlike, and it doesn't make it any less uncomfortable. But I think these are two characters who care for each other, but don't know how to express or define that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which makes it very interesting throughout the course of watching this movie, watching them interact with each other. You're uncomfortable at sometimes. Sometimes it's very heartwarming. Sometimes it's very like, just, this is what it is. They're doing sit-ups, the training montage.
Love the training
it's very
montage.
much like a Yoda Luke Skywalker relationship. And then at the end, he just says, I love you, Matilda. You taught me how to connect with a person again. Like, and it's just sort of like, there is an innocence in that, and you understand they brought something to each other, even though you don't exactly know how to define it, and even though it's crazy uncomfortable at certain points of the movie.
Right. It's weird because you mentioned like it's not like paternal, it's not romantic, it's not sexual, like, and it's not just friendship or just teacher. Like, there are these things in life that have, like, we try to categorize what love is, the different categories, but it's like, it's just affection for another person, and it can take like a lot of different shapes.
Right.
So I think it's cool to have stories where you kind of examine these weird characters.
Yeah.
And just how they fit together.
And to think about this as being 1994, so early 90s, I think today with social media, we have a lot more of these kinds of relationships with people that are like virtual friendships. And then have you ever like talked to somebody online a lot and then, you know, they bring you into a group and they go, oh, this is my friend. And I've had people go, I hope you don't mind that I call you my friend because we haven't officially, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like there's these sort of like, you know, how do we define, because I talk to you a lot, but I only talk to you online. I've never met you. I've never, you know, and this predates that by a couple of decades, that this is sort of like a commonplace way to have a relationship with people now is through different social media or different virtual ways. Sometimes they're just like gamer buddies or something like that. And you are friendly, but it's like how, you know, we're not putting there's no label to put on this.
Right.
And it's sort of like acknowledging, like, without saying it straight up, this movie is kind of going like, yeah, all these relationship dynamics are almost, you know, we talk a lot about breaking down constructs today. And in 94, that he's kind of going, this is a relationship that defies a label.
Right.
And
really, it's not, if you look at the content, it is not inappropriate, except for when they try to label it. Like, or when it's brought up or outside viewers see it. Like,
yeah.
So it really is just the relationship that's there is there.
Like the hotel, you know, it's awkward when they're checking into the hotel because they're pretending to be a father and daughter.
Right.
You know, and then it's awkward when she tells the hotel guy, oh yeah, we sleep together. You know what I mean? Like there's these weird aspects. It's awkward when Tony is like, is this about a woman? Is this about, you know, are you in trouble with a woman? Like,
it's like everyone's getting
implying is like, oh, if you care for someone, it must be romantic. No, that's not it. You know, and that's when the movie is the most uncomfortable and everybody on screen is the most uncomfortable. Yes. So it is sort of telling that it is like, yeah, when we try and put it in this box, it is this thing. But the reality is these are two sort of emotionally immature people who are plotting to murder people. So it is sort of like when you get to that part of it, you have to acknowledge it like, yeah, this is a completely new kind of relationship. Of course, this defies everything. This is a murder plot that they are in the middle of hatching right here.
I forget, like midway through this movie, that they're gonna murder people.
You forget that Leon almost murdered her the first night she was in his apartment.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I can't
he didn't want
have this
that
child,
mess. Yeah.
You know, have this mess on my hands. So, yeah, it's a really interesting, it's an interesting dynamic to watch play out. And it's one of those things that I sort of am like, how can I say this without sounding like, oh yeah, go extreme all the time. But like art isn't always comfortable. Like,
yeah,
you know, in order to portray something that is ultimately beautiful, which I think their relationship ultimately is, sometimes you have to drag somebody through something that makes them feel uncomfortable. You ever see a piece of art that makes you feel uncomfortable and you're like, it took a lot of balls to put that up there on screen.
It's showing all the sides.
Right. That's not to say that like you should be super extreme and strive to offend people. Like there's people who are like
it's shock value. Yeah.
Right. First year art students who are like, I'm going to show the most gruesome, disgusting. No, that's not it. But like,
but also I just like, I don't know how to say this because you don't have to explain yourself in your art. You don't. Like, I like the art speaking for itself. But when it is that, like, you're making people uncomfortable, you also have to make your point clear. And I think it's there in this movie. I just wish it had been, like, stated a little, even if it was, like, a third party or something. But, like...
Yeah, I know where you're coming from, because you and I disagree on this a lot.
I just think if a bad person can watch this movie and misconstrue it as, like, oh, it's normal for an adult man to love a 12-year-old girl in an inappropriate way, then, like, you're getting the wrong... Like, you need to have that, like, stop. Spray with water or something.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And it's a weird line to walk, because I always feel like it is on the viewer. And I don't think anybody is... I have yet to see a piece of art, a film, or a book, or something like that would convince somebody who doesn't already lean in a toxic way to go that way. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
like a film that is like a film like American History X or something like that. Just pulled the first, like, super racist film out of my head, which is a very anti-racist film.
Yes.
But I could see, like, there's an argument that could be made that is sort of like, oh, this is showing someone, what it's like to belong to a neo-Nazi chapter. And that could convince somebody to do that. And it's like, that's not going to convince somebody who's not racist to be a racist. Like, that is, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, like, but that's just, I understand where you're coming from, because you and I have had this talk a lot about, like, what is the responsibility of an artist? And, today, everybody's talking about what is the responsibility of something like Spotify in propping up somebody who spreads misinformation.
Right.
It's
kind of that thing.
It's a legit conversation to have. I don't want to dismiss all points on it.
It's a thing where it's like, were you going to do that before you... It's not monkey see, monkey do. It's monkey was already going to do and monkey saw. But at the same time, I do see stories and movies as, like, little bits of information and little, like, debates or kind of, like, moral, like, here's what it is. Like,
sure,
you're teaching something, you're stating something, and I don't think it's needed, but I like it when it's stated just, like, a little, not, like, too on the nose.
I think it should just be open up the credits before any names. There should be, like, a...
the movie you just saw.
The movie, right. There should be just a piece of text up there that says, don't molest children, please.
That's it.
Like, if you think that Leon's had an appropriate relationship, then you need to seek counseling or something like that.
Sure.
That is something I will say, the last podcast on the left, when they talk about serial killers and they talk about mental illness, and they talk about serial killers with mental illness, and they're always like, we're not invalidating mental illness or these things, but you need to, if you are having feelings like this, they say this very often, if you are having similar feelings, go get yourself some help. Like, reach out to people.
That's a real thing,
and like, they're like, we're not vilifying the illness. And Marcus Parks on that show has the best quote about it. It says, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And I think that is something that really does sum up a lot of these issues. It's like, if you're angry about something and you watch this movie and that fans the flame of it, your anger may be justified, your, whatever, but you need to take care of that.
And you can't blame the art.
You can't blame the art, and you have to take the chip on your shoulder, whatever that looks like, and do what, do the responsible thing with it.
There is a thing in, I don't want to be like my generation, but I do think that there is, like, policing. Like, there is, no, you made your content wrong because it could go this way or be misconstrued. I'm just approaching this more from a point of, as a storyteller, what could make this more impactful to the viewer? I mean,
let's look at it from a different perspective, because I am seeing this as the best Punisher movie that's ever been made.
All right.
Because it is essentially a revenge story about just murdering the hell out of 1 million people. And that's the Punisher story. But the Punisher logo has been essentially co-opted by the alt-right, the crazy militant, like, alt-right, a lot of neo-Nazis, a lot of, like, crazy, like, pro-war, pro-military people. They've sort of co-opted the skull, the Punisher skull, and sort of flying it at a bunch of essentially hate rallies. Now, is that the fault of Marvel Comics for making a super militant, violent superhero? That was certainly never their intention, was to fan. I mean, when you look at Marvel Comics, founded and most of their properties created by Jewish men, a lot of Jewish immigrants in the history of comic books,
trying to stop
they
war.
They certainly never intended for neo-Nazis who hate Jews to be flying a Punisher flag at a rally alongside like a Trump or a swastika flag or a Confederate flag. Like, is that the fault of the creator that somebody else sort of co-opted the messaging of this same thing?
The Punisher is an interesting one because I actually hate him.
Because that character sucks.
He anti-hero where he just shoots
he's just a murderer. Yeah.
But
yeah.
No, I do think that that is a case of like the audience is just looking for something to represent them, even if it's the opposite. Because the Punisher, he kills cops, he kills like military people, he
kills everybody. Yeah.
He kills radicalized, dangerous individuals.
He kills corruption.
And that is kind of what these people, these alt-right people who adopted his symbol are. But that is an interesting example because if you look at more recent Punisher stuff, they changed his logo because of that. They gave him a new logo that everyone hates.
Marvel has sort of like been up against it as far as what to do because they famously, even in like Captain America stories, do not allow swastikas in their books, which I also think is a questionable call because when you're writing stories about Nazis,
I actually think that's detrimental. Like the whole Hydra thing, like, no, those are Nazis. And if you're gonna, you should fight the actual thing because then you have this symbol and you forget.
When you take the symbol away, you make Nazis into non-real things.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, they're very real. Like,
so the Holocaust was about magical aliens trying to get a stone. No. No, it was not.
Well, Hydra was a thing that was, I mean, that was before, but like at a certain point, I think it was Joe Q said, no more swastikas anywhere in our books, which I think is very well intended, but it's like, you're also writing stories, Hydra aside, you're writing stories about Nazis. You're writing World War II era stories about Captain America. They would do like flashback stories.
Yeah.
It's like, these are stories about Nazis, and this is what Nazis look like, and this is what they wore. And let's not pretend that wasn't a real thing by taking, it's iconography. I get it. I'm not even claiming to be 100% correct. I think there's a lot of room for conversation about it. But
with the Punisher, I do think he is just an awful character that should be retired.
Yes.
There's no point.
There's no message. Every Punisher story is exactly the same. He just goes on a rampage and murders 1 million people.
Yeah,
like that's it. Much like the end of this movie. It's just a bloodbath. One man killing like 100 cops in an apartment building.
And not making it out alive.
He did not make it out alive. But he had a good end.
He did.
Worthy of the Punisher.
He also kind of did make it out because the plant made it out. The plant's him.
That's a very interesting point.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the plant.
All right. So a plant is a thing that photosynthesizes, and when
tell me more.
Yeah, that's all I've got. What did you want to say about the plant?
My one note on the plant is I think there is a nod to that in Hot Fuzz with Simon Pegg. He has like the peace lily.
Yeah, he kind of carries around.
The genius of Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg collaborations is just that, like, they reference so many things. And Hot Fuzz, I think, has the most movie references in it. Like, every aspect of Hot Fuzz is a parody of a cop movie somewhere.
They find a way to cram in a joke there.
I think the Peace Lily is his version of the Professionals plant.
Wonderful.
And I love that so much. But no, I do like that she sort of symbolically buries him at the end by putting the plant in the dirt, and also like lets him live on.
Right. It's like setting him free.
Yeah.
Because she says earlier, there's like a kind of metaphor in there where she, I don't know, he's talking about taking care of the plant, and she says that you should plant it outside where its roots can grow. And so, like, it's kind of like, oh, this plant is being protected, but it's trapped.
Right.
In the pot. And so she's kind of like, he's dead now. He no longer has to work for anyone or has to be a hitman. He's able to be free. And so is she.
Yeah.
She's completed her revenge, and now she's at school, which the whole movie they were telling kids, you should be in school. Where...
Right.
Why are you out here? You should be in school. That's said like 2 or 3 times in the movie, and then she winds up at school where she was meant to be.
Where she was supposed to be anyway.
A kid. Yeah.
There is an aspect of her no longer being confined by the city, no longer being confined by her family, and no longer being confined by her revenge, and that she is sort of that plant as well.
Yeah. What they don't show, though, is the next day when the school's gardener is like, who the hell planted this unauthorized plant?
It is kind of like in the middle of a field. It's like, put it over by the tree where it's not going to get hit by the lawnmower. Like, yeah, that plant didn't make it.
Shh, it's a movie.
Also, she has no idea. I mean, she's in New York, New Jersey area. You know, she doesn't know if that plant can survive a winter.
Yeah, what's the climate like?
I mean, what does it need? Maybe it's supposed to be in a pot in an apartment so it can,
You know, he opens... Let's do some investigative journalism here. He opens the window every morning to let it out.
Yep.
So it must be okay with the chill.
Yeah, it is. Is it summertime? I think it's kind of...
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if they ever give like a month, but yeah, it's not snowing. It's not wintertime. Definitely.
Oh, well.
So, yeah.
We'll see.
This movie is similar to another movie we've watched for this show.
What's that?
True Grit. I found a lot of similarity between True Grit on this rewatch. It is a young girl seeking revenge, and she gets like a grizzled old loner who doesn't want to help her.
Yeah.
And eventually, there is because that's the beautiful part of True Grit as well, is the relationship that she has to Rooster, which is much more of a cut and dry partnership, and very much like a traditional friendship. It is not in any way the same level of like discomfort that this film has, but there is like similarly a very touching relationship between these two very different characters.
Right. I think that's interesting because I didn't think about that, but
I don't know why it has never hit me until like we just watched this the other day. I'm like, this is like so similar to that.
Yeah, I guess it's just, do you want that story set in the Wild West or
in
90s
New York City? In both cases, you have a young actor who is going on to have like a big career.
Yeah.
Haley Steinfeld is doing great work. Next Spider-Verse coming out
That's right.
this year? Is it this year?
It's this year.
Yeah, all right. And Natalie Portman. This was, I think, her first movie for sure.
Right.
But in talking about fallout from misinterpreted things, I did find there was mention, and this was through like a Twitter post or something, but people did talk about how her parents requested certain things be taken out of the script because there probably was a little more of the sexual aspect.
Right. Well, I mean...
it was a little more blatant or a little more uncomfortable, and they were like, yeah... Because I saw her, it might have been like Inside the Actors Studio, something like that, where she gave an interview, and she did talk about, like, her parents had a lot of concern with this because they liked the role, but they were also like, this is a really sexual role.
Right.
Do we want to put our daughter in this? And that they worked with Luc Besson.
That's interesting. I wonder what changed then, because, I mean... This is already pretty uncomfortable. So, like, what did they say no to?
Yeah, I don't know.
Change the original meaning of anything?
It could have just been a little more, a little less ambiguous, or maybe just a little more just
maybe there's a scene where she pushed it too far or something.
Something, yeah. But then I saw also an article where she was talking about basically like the first fan letter she received after this movie, and it was a full-grown man who sent a rape fantasy about her, and it is
that's
to
awful.
Your point of, but she talked about it in the context of this is what women in this industry deal with, and I don't know that she regrets being in the professional, but she does talk about, like, this is a movie that caused me to be sexualized in a public eye, in the way that
such a young age.
The way that reviewers wrote about her and things like that. And here's this child in Hollywood that was being written about by professionals and getting really disgusting, perverted fan mail.
Yeah.
From people who saw this and, to your point, took it the wrong, missed the message, missed the idea that that's not what this relationship is.
It makes me think of, I saw this brilliant interview with Bo Burnham after he did 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And talking about, there's a scene in a car where, if you haven't seen that movie, older boy tries to touch a girl in this game, and she says no, and then, like, he just, okay, and he drives her home, and on paper, it doesn't sound like anything that bad, but, like... In the movie,
it's super uncomfortable.
It is brutal. And he talks about how he filmed that, how the actress's dad was on set, and how they really had to talk about, like, what this scene means, what each action means, and, like, they understood the message of this going in and why that scene was important. And there's something like that where, like, maybe if Natalie Portman had that kind of protection during this movie, and I mean her parents were involved, so maybe she did. Like,
I'm sure it was. I'm sure the set was different for a lot of. I mean, Bo Burnham was essentially a child star himself. I'm sure he understands. I mean, it's a different context. He was doing stand-up comedy when he was like 16, as opposed to being on a movie set
and being just a girl in general.
That as well. But I'm just saying, like, I think he has an idea of, what the business is like.
And what harm other people...
how to build, like, a safe environment for a kid in the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Natalie Portman's parents did or how well acquainted they were. I'm sure the set itself was fine, but it's just the fallout that came after that, You can't control what a crazy fan is going to write to you, or what how a reviewer is going to, I don't even remember what it was, but it would write about something in a vaguely sexual way, and it's just sort of like, this isn't a fully adult actress in a sexual role. This is a child exploring, like, an uncomfortable relationship.
Right.
To that same note, I know we did a whole episode on 8th grade, But I've seen a few interview clips with Bo Burnham talking about filming a different, like the banana scene. He's like, that was 100% like closed set, you know, like nobody was allowed on there. We took it very, very seriously. And he talked about like the pool scene, like the pool party.
Right, where there's bathing suits and stuff.
Right, and he's like, anytime that we were not filming for the movie, every camera pointed directly at the ground, you know, and they were being kids. They were playing. He's, you know, really tried to have like a healthy environment for kids to not feel uncomfortable while they were filming all this stuff. And it just is sort of like, yeah, you get it. You're not terribly older than these kids. You were a kid when you broke in, and you understand with all the current climate and the current conversation, you understand what not to do, how to build an environment where everybody feels safe. And I'm like, that's really cool to hear. And it kind of makes you think like there is another way of doing these kind of tackling uncomfortable movies.
It's doable.
and making everybody on a set feel like this is a positive experience.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a way to do it.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard.
It's really interesting, actually, just to hear someone be like that conscious of it.
Yeah.
Because as much as you're sitting here going like, yeah, my generation over polices, which is, I know that's not exactly what you said, but it is a sentiment that I do agree with. But I also think your generation, it comes from a good place because your generation is more conscious of these things.
Right.
Than older generations that were just sort of like, yeah, this is how we do it. Gen X has never given a shit about anything. We've always just been like, yeah, that's fine. But we're also at the same time when like things are changing, like we're being more conscious. We're also like, yeah, that's fine. We also are not standing in the way of that.
Yeah, but like I said, the policing kind of leads to like good change.
It can lead to good change, yeah. Like, I just want it to also lead to good art, where it's still, you 100%. know, there's some subtlety and there's some nuance to everything, and I think that is still happening. I think 8th grade did a great job of that, of never saying like, the kid who makes a move on her and then gaslights the shit out of her. They make it very clear, like, without saying blatantly, this kid's a problem.
Yeah.
They just let you see that kid is a problem. You know what I mean? Like, and there's still like, without telling you point blank, there's not much mistaking that kid is a problematic, toxic kid.
Right.
And that, it's you know, that she is the victim in that. And that you kind of also get a sense like, yeah, she'll figure it out. Like, you know, at a certain point.
Back to Leon, because we've talked about like the story and all that, but like I want to talk about the direction real quick, because I just feel like there are so many like scenes in this where there's something about the atmosphere where you like soak it in. There's like the emotional moments, even as far as when like Leon first meets Matilda and she's smoking in the stairwell. And I don't know, there's just like, and I noticed this a lot in like movies from the 90s where they just kind of let a scene like be a scene. Mm-hmm. And I'm used to modern movies where it's like, move at such a fast pace. Like, I just enjoy when you just can soak in that moment.
Oh, you should watch some 70s movies.
Oh boy. Well,
I
don't want to get bored.
There's some meandering. There's some ambient noise leaking in a lot of there. The color's off. It looks dirty and grungy and great.
Ambient noise. That's my favorite.
But it's there for a reason. It's not.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah,
like it feels real because everybody has those. And I'm talking about 70s and these 90s scenes that you're talking about.
It's like the thing we said about anime. Like these what was it called, like Spirited Away, those movies.
Like
how they have those quiet scenes,
that just sort of let you see somebody just being, you know, it as opposed to a lot of movies where every scene has to either pay off something or foreshadow something. You know, every scene is a piece of a puzzle that locks together the entire plot of this. Some of these movies from the 90s, like I was saying, Travis and I talking about Jackie Brown, Tarantino did this a lot, where it's just a conversation scene. It leads to nothing. It has nothing to do with the plot. It's just, you get to see these characters just being characters.
Yeah.
That, I think the smoking scene that you're talking about is great, because it does show you, like, Matilda's a little, you know, she's very young and she's smoking. She's a little bit, she's not a juvenile delinquent, but she's like a rebellious kid.
Yeah, she's like pushing the edge.
Yeah, she's an edgy tween.
Edgelord.
Yeah. But yeah, it is a little bit of a character moment. It introduces that Leon lives down the hall, you know, but yeah, for the most part, it's just a scene that exists, like the same kind of way that, I don't know, like you see her going to the store and it's like, what do we need to follow her through the store, you know, getting groceries for her family.
Sure.
Or even like the family dysfunction scene that goes on way too long. You know what I mean? Like, but in all of that, like, my big problem with that is, like, you never see her brother until her brother is murdered. And so then she has to say, like, oh, well, I loved my brother, but just him. And it's like, we never saw you interact with your brother. We never saw that relationship.
We got the whole scene of this family we already knew from the get-go was shitty and
just
mean
a
to her.
Shitty, dysfunctional family, right?
But we don't get to see the brother be nice. Like,
right.
There should have been a scene in
We saw her dad hit her like 3 times, you know, but never saw like a positive thing. So then when it gets to that point, she has to say point blank, well, I loved my brother and they murdered him. And it's just sort of like, we should have seen that at some point. Like, that's a big drawback for me for this movie. It doesn't kill the movie for me, but it is just sort of like, why did we never see that? And
they even have like the scene where she goes back and gets a teddy bear. Like, that could be in like the scene where you show him being nice.
Show them playing with the teddy bear together or something like that.
Build a connection to that in the story.
Yeah, it is it's not a plot hole, but it is like a hole in the character development. When this movie is this based in character, that definitely should have been a moment.
It's a big missed opportunity, yeah. I've kind of hit all the beats I wanted to hit. Do you have like anything else?
I just wonder, we've watched so many Gary Oldman movies.
Sure.
I think we should reach out to his people and see if he wants to be a guest on our show.
On the Gary Oldman show?
On the Gary Oldman show. And out of all of that, we have any Gary Oldman movies left that you would want to talk to him about?
Oh my gosh.
Let's just fantasy. Is it
fiction?
Would it be like
Gary Oldman
what character would you want to talk to Gary Oldman about?
I don't even know. I would need.
It'd be like Sirius Black or something like that.
Sirius Black is a good one. Man, I don't know. I really like him as Commissioner Gordon. Like, that is my go-to Gary Oldman role.
Well, it's where we get to spend... I mean, well, Sirius Black is in several movies, but, like, Commissioner Gordon, you do sort of get an arc of... As much as we talk about, like, you get the full arc of Batman through that trilogy, you get a big Jim Gordon arc there, too. You see him as, like, a rookie officer and a rookie detective... all the way until, like, he's on the downside of his career.
What I'm interested in, though, is seeing his earlier roles, like, he in True Romance and this...
right around the same time, actually.
He's like this crazy, like, Jared Leto type of character, where he's wild and raw.
That's a really interesting comparison, actually.
He went from the same typecast as Jared Leto to being this... serious, soft, old man type cast, and it's interesting to see that progression.
What is it? Because Gary Oldman, I feel like always has gotten props for being that kind of actor, and everyone is hated on Jared Leto for being that kind of actor. So what has the audience changed, or
no? Because
is
Gary Oldman isn't an asshole like those characters outside of his roles. He has never sent like dead fish or whatever it was to his coworkers. He's not a lunatic.
I don't know as much about Jared Leto, but yeah, Jared Leto strikes you as super pretentious.
He strikes me as the person who is an asshole-ish dick, and then he's like, "Oh no, sorry, I was method acting for this character." That's
right.
That character did the bad thing, not me.
Like I think that's a really interesting point, because someone like Daniel Day-Lewis, who's like a notorious method actor, right? Like lives as, you know, whatever his character is going to be for like a year before they film it, right? But I don't feel like Daniel Day-Lewis, I feel like he kind of annoys everybody, because you're like, oh, you have to call me Abraham Lincoln or whatever.
It's all right.
But he's not like a complete asshole, like, and then he like hiding behind the character like that. You're right. That might be it. Gary Oldman has always just struck me as like his blue collar actor, you know,
yeah,
who plays like eccentric characters as opposed to just being like a pretentious douchebag about it. But I think I would talk to him about this character. I think I would talk to him about Stansfield, because I think there's
some really cool moments with him.
This is such an out loud performance, and there's still like some nuance to it, but he is mostly just chewing scenery and going crazy. But I feel like he still has control of, you know, he doesn't just cut loose. He still has control over this character.
Right.
And he's like sweaty and twitchy and just, he feels so gross.
It's like he's wild, but like holding himself back.
Holding it in, yeah. And I like that band. Oh, I'm listening to classical music and being crazy and being like the Joker. And then like when he's like, bring in everybody. And they're like, everybody. And you go, you know, the famous like, everybody. Like that is him just letting it out, you know, and I feel like everything he does here, it's like super measured. Actually, Gary Oldman working with Luc Besson, because in The Fifth Element, he does, you know, he's that crazy guy in there too, and I just think he's doing such interesting work. It's really fun.
It's great, I think.
I love this character.
That's just why I'm so like, I'm seeing this typecast here and I'm like, well, when did it change? Why did it change? Like, he was so good at it.
Yeah.
He's still good. I'm just curious about it.
No, I think he just got offered other roles, and I think he still does stuff. Like he was in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. He did some real British movies, you know. He was still like doing this other work, but like, you know, Christopher Nolan comes to you and says, do you want to be in a Batman trilogy and get paid? Sure. You want to be in a Harry Potter series and get paid? Sure. And then he still gets to go do whatever he wants, you know. But right. Yeah, he in the 90s, True Romance, you see the guy in this with like the dreadlocks, the white guy with dreadlocks. It's like, it looks kind of like, you're playing Gary Oldman from True Romance.
He's using the same makeup and all that.
Really, like if he was missing an eye and wearing a beret, that would have been perfect. But like, yeah, he's playing some really eccentric kind of characters in the 90s, more than he is today. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I love Gary Oldman, and love him in this. But yeah, I think that's about all I got. The last note I have is Tony is clearly stealing from Leon. I think he's clearly like,
oh yeah,
100% like it. And I think that leads in so much to Leon not being very bright. Leon being stunted in some way. Like, he doesn't even understand that Tony doesn't have your money. Like, you don't have any money.
There is no money.
There's no money, right? It's.
Oh, you want it all? Here's $100. Like,
right? He has a little bit that he can like, and he's like, oh, I got it all up here, and it's like, you don't have any money, and it even kind of shows like he always like looks there's the old guy in like the back of the restaurant.
Yeah.
You know, and it's sort of like, you kind of see Leon realizing like, that's me. If I stay, you know, in this like, that's where you end up, because there's no money. Like, you just end up sort of hanging out in Tony's restaurant for the rest of your life.
It's just sad.
Like, that's the last guy Tony managed, probably. And it's just sort of like this, it's an interesting dynamic, because in the same kind of way, I feel like Tony does care about Leon in some way. But he also sells him out, and he's clearly been stealing from him for years.
And
so
I just love when he gives Matilda the same line at the end.
Yeah.
Better than a bank.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they have fees or whatever.
Yeah, he's like, they get knocked off. No one robs me. And he's had the shit kicked out of him by Gary Oldman. But it's the same thing. He like gives her $100. He's like, come back next month and I'll give you another 100. And it's like, yeah, because there's no money for Matilda. You know that.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of like this idea. This movie is made of interesting relationship dynamics all the way around. Like, everybody has a fucked up relationship with everybody else, you know?
Right.
And it's just sort of like, I guess in that way, it's super true to life, because I think most people have complicated relationships with other people.
Yeah, most people are manipulated and they don't know.
Or it's just, how do we define this? Even, you know, back to that thing. So it's are you glad you watched this?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was uncomfortable, but I think overall it was a good movie.
I think it is a good movie, and I think it holds up really well. I was really happy to see that it held up this well. And I think, to the uncomfortable part, as an audience, I know as an audience, there's a lot of people who don't want to talk about Luc Besson and Luc Besson movies right now. But I think as an audience, as a whole, we're better equipped to talk about a movie like this than we were when it came out. And people would go, oh, this is either normalizing sexualizing kids, the little girl who plays this, or they'd go, this is kind of a gross movie, I don't want to deal with it, and just walk away from it. And here we can kind of acknowledge that, like, yeah, it is gross and it is uncomfortable. Let's have a conversation about the weird dynamics of this movie and how it is as a piece of art, and how it is, and what this movie is really saying about these kind of things.
Right.
And I just feel like there's a more sophisticated audience now who can really deal with what this movie is about.
I think that's fair.
But yeah, I'm glad we watched it. I think it's a interesting way to kick off season 4.
It's a good start.
Yeah, I think so. Should we move on to shout outs?
Let's shout some things out.
I wanted to
You want to go first?
Well, I thought we'd do a joint shout out this week.
Sure thing.
Just
steal my shout out from
I'm sorry,
Dad.
I'm kind of taking the wheel and taking over. I'm bowling over you this episode, but as we're talking about this, recently a school board in Tennessee has decided to ban the graphic novel Mouse.
I heard about this
from their library. So I wanted to shout out banned books. We did not do a banned books week episode last year. Go back in the very beginning of our archives. My sister Amy, who is a library science geek, joined us, and we talked about banned books weeks. And we didn't do it last year, but I do want to shout it out now. Gift a banned book to a kid, especially if you know a kid who lives in an area where their school and public libraries are constantly being bullied by religious groups or hate groups or whatever to ban literature. And I want to read this quote from Stephen King, who talks about banned books. And he says, I'm never much disturbed, not as a citizen, not as a writer, not even as a school teacher, which I used to be. What I tell kids is don't get mad, get even. Don't spend your time waving signs or carrying petitions around the neighborhood. Instead, run. Don't walk to the nearest non-school library or to the local bookstore and get whatever it is that they banned. Read whatever it is they're trying to keep out of your eyes and your brain, because that's exactly what you need to know. And when you look at something like Mouse, which is a comic book by Art Spiegelman that is about his father's experiences in Poland during World War II, during the Holocaust, why would anybody, with the rise of hate groups in America, and now you look at people wanting to ban books about the Holocaust at the same time we're trying to ban critical race theory from being taught. And there is a lot of correlation there. They're claiming that they want it banned because there's a swear word in it. And I believe there's some cartoon nudity in it. A cartoon mouse is naked. Oh no. We must spare the children of this. But it is just one of those things where, yes, this is what you say you're banning it for. I don't believe that's what they're banning it for. And it is the same kind of thing. Okay, take it out of your school. But, look at really why you're doing this. And you just want to buy that book and send it to kids and be like, read this book, please.
If you read that book and curse words and cartoon boob are the things that offend you and not the grotesque, vile nature
the idea
Nazis,
of right.
I don't know what else there is to do for you.
There's just there's only really one reason anybody would not want books about of this subject matter to be available to kids, and
it's sad.
It is sad. So ban books, please. It can be Mouse, it can be whatever. Give a banned book to a kid and encourage them to read it, because generally books that are banned are important ones, I think.
Very.
That's what I got. That's shout outs.
Banned books. That's so true. We live in a state that just passed a law banning the talking of gender identity and race in classrooms. We are not allowed to talk about that at all unless it pertains to a lesson. And it's this whole tricky thing of it has to be impartial in a way that you have to teach the Holocaust in this certain way that's impartial. No one was incorrect or correct, and it's like that isn't how history works.
And that's language that is like up to interpretation.
Yes, someone can, a parent can sue if they don't like something,
and a judge can rule.
Because the rule is that vague.
A way, yes.
It's really messed up.
It's super messed up. So
and the way to fight that is to give kids books, is to gain access to these things, and
to encourage school boards to stand up to these groups that come out and complain. Because generally they don't have a leg to stand on, and it's just hate mongering. Anyway, we gotta have Amy back. We have to do another banned books episode this year. I think
we should.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Picture Show with Austin and Phil Rude. If you enjoy our show, please leave a review on your podcatcher of choice. It helps our visibility. It helps us grow the show.
That's right. Another way to help us grow is to hire a hitman. Not just any hitman, but one that will take out other movie podcast hosts.
Ooh, yes.
Limit the competition for us.
We're going to kill everyone.
That's right.
Everyone!
Yeah, so tell your friends about us, because we're weird.
Yeah. Us, you have the wheel next week. What are we watching?
That's right. You picked Leon the Professional, and now it's my turn. And I'm picking The Phantom Thread.
I just put that on my Netflix list. I just watched There Will Be Blood again.
Okay.
And this was my next Paul Thomas Anderson movie that I was going to watch.
This is one of those movies. It came out like 2017.
I haven't seen it still.
I have not. I've never seen this movie, but I saw the trailer when it was coming out, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then I forgot about it, and I was just scrolling through Netflix.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes they play a trailer, sometimes they play just like a clip from the movie, and there was this breathtaking monologue.
Was it the dinner table
thing?
It
is, yes. I was...
Me too! That's the thing that got me as well.
I was so gripped by that monologue. I was like, I have to watch this.
Awesome.
I have to watch that. So that is our next movie, and I think it's going to be good.
Phantom... I like Paul... Into it I like Paul Thomas Anderson, and you know, as much as we bagged on, or, you know, took a shot at Daniel Day-Lewis and his weird method acting today, I like Daniel Day-Lewis as an actor. I think he's great.
Is that the old man in that? Or is he some...
He's the main guy in there. Okay. I guess that's him. Yeah.
It's the guy monologuing.
Also, watch There Will Be Blood. It's a great movie. I watch it every few years, and it's freaking amazing. He's awesome in it.
Okay. So stick around for that.
Yeah, Phantom Thread. Cool. Social media.
Yep. It's been so long.
What do we got?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm Austin .n.rude, and then I'm also Old Who Review.
That's right.
That is where you find me.
All right.
Where can people find you, Dad?
philrude.com. You can get all our episodes. You can well, I should have a limited run book available for sale on there shortly after this drops. And you can find out how to contact me. Commissions are open. But other than that, at Phil Rude on Twitter, at PhilRude75 on Instagram. Oz, you want to read the credits?
Yep. As we did for the past 3 seasons, this season we are doing everything ourselves.
There you have it. We'll see you next time on The Picture Show.
See ya.
Let's go drink some milk.